Okay, so today's agenda, I did have somebody that was going to be speaking about the advantages of running your unit as a short-term rental versus long-term rentals. Lots of people are doing the short-term rentals. Lots of people are making lots of money on it. There's some pros and cons and some concerns and lots of information. I'm not an expert on it, so I decided I'm not going to try to do the presentation. I will wait hopefully next month. My presentator will be back. Yeah, she has COVID. So hopefully she comes back next month and can do a presentation on that because I think it's a pretty valuable topic, especially in a time where it's really hard to find cash flowing properties. And it's a way that you can take kind of a neutral property to something that's actually doing pretty good returns. So I'm going to just talk briefly about kind of my views on the difference between being a real estate investor and investing in real estate. Some people kind of aren't really sure where they fit into that category. So I'm going to be talking briefly about that. I'm going to be talking about the market. Obviously, we've seen some interest rate hikes in the last little bit here, and that does seem to be having an effect on the market. It could also be the spring market. So I'll be addressing that briefly. I thought it might be of value. I had to kind of put this presentation together kind of quickly here because I originally had another plan that isn't working out. So I figured it might be of interest to explain how I search for properties, the software I use as a real estate agent to search for properties. I recently had a client that was asking me what criteria I can enter into my search program so that I can find things. And so it's beneficial if you know how I can search for properties, so you know the best way I can find properties for you, what I can search for, what I can't search for. And hopefully we can find properties a little bit easier that way. And there's a new website that everybody should definitely check out. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I view the difference between investing in real estate and being a real estate investor. So I don't know, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with the RAIN program and the Keyspire program. They're real estate investment education networking groups. They're both available in Canada. There's huge amounts of members of these things. They're a great resource to be able to network with people that are looking to raise capital, looking for deals. They have tons of education, they have forums, they have all sorts of great stuff. What I've been encountering is a lot of people that are interested in investing in real estate. They want to go and buy an investment property and generate a return on it. And so they look at these programs and these courses that RAIN and Keyspire offer. And they sign up for them because they think it's going to teach them how to invest in real estate. These programs do offer that education. They do offer a way to learn about investing in real estate, but their primary teaching is how to create a real estate investor, somebody that actually does it as a profession, not somebody that's doing it passively on the side. So kind of the way I view this is, if I personally go out and I buy a property and I hold that property in my name or in a holding company's name, and I own it for a number of years and then I sell it, that's me investing in real estate. Now, a real estate investor is somebody that goes out and vets deals, finds money lenders, puts partnerships together, possibly does the property management, organizes the contractors for work that's done, and they're essentially a vessel for you to invest your money in so that they can invest it into real estate. So quite often people that are real estate investors are not using their own capital. They're raising capital through investments, either hard money lenders or joint venture scenarios. So it's a huge commitment. If you want to take other people's money and invest it in real estate, first of all, you need to understand the securities issues there. You can't just raise capital from strangers and invest it into something. That is a big no-no. You can, however, work with family members, friends, and work with them as long as you have a relationship with them. Now, the definition of a relationship is the threshold quite often people use, have they been inside your house, is the long and short of it. If they're your friend, they've probably been to your house. If they're a family member, there's been to their house. If it's somebody that you met on a bus once, that's not your friend. So if you are looking to create a career of market research, doing due diligence, managing properties, vetting deals, raising capital, and putting these packages together, that's a real estate investor. Somebody that just invests in real estate is very much passive on the side. They're doing it in their personal name. Maybe they have a joint venture partner, but they're not doing huge capital raises and development projects and stuff like that. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that because a lot of people have this idea that they want to invest in real estate. They go take the KeySpire program, and then they come out and they've basically been told that they need to go start raising huge amounts of capital and buy these huge development properties and raise millions of dollars and take people's money. And that's a very, very different avenue than just choosing to own a personal real estate investment. Some people have major problems with grading and KeySpire. The programs are very expensive. Last I checked, somewhere in the $15,000 to $30,000 range for the education that's provided. Now, if you take that education and you run with it and you become somebody that is now collecting money from people and you're a real estate investor, it's a great investment. The education is great. If you just want to go buy a piece of property as an investment in your own personal name, you don't need to spend $15,000 or $30,000 on this program to be able to get the education you need to do that. So just know what your intent is ahead of time. If you want an investment or two on the side, that's pretty straightforward. If you want to start doing this as a full-time job, then getting the education to do it is not a bad idea. Has anyone have any experience with KeySpire or RAIN, or not a lot? Brandon was supposed to be here. He's gone through the KeySpire program. I thought maybe he'd chime in, but yeah. So anyhow, just know what your intent is from the onset. If you just want to own an investment property or two, or if you want to turn this into a profession. So I'm going to do a quick market update. There has been, in the last month, actually a fair bit of change in the market. These are real little numbers. If anyone can't read them, it doesn't really matter too much. So these are stats from March. It just shows Greater Vancouver, Fraser Valley, Chilliwack, Vancouver Island, Powell River. So the year-over-year change, we are still seeing it climbing. Prices are still up. Chilliwack and Vancouver Island, the highest year-over-year change, at about 25% increase in price from March of 2021. And then months of supply is the other one, is just how much inventory is on the market to buy. If no more properties came on the market today, how long would it take before all of the properties on the market were sold? And Vancouver Island is 1.2 months. That's a very, very low number by historic standards. But you are seeing a little bit more in the Vancouver area and stuff like that. Not a huge indicator of the market. There's a lot of moving pieces, and I'll try to explain a little better what I'm actually seeing in the market on the island here. This is a stat on mid-Vancouver Island area with the listing ratio to sell ratio for your price. So historically, it's going to be below 100%. So if someone's asking $1 million for a house, somewhere, usually in a balanced market, it's going to sell for slightly under that. As you can see, it's been kind of just under or around 100% until January. January 2021, and that's when we started seeing the ridiculous multiple offer scenarios. It stayed pretty much over 100%. Until now, it's still well over 100%. Early this year in February, stuff was ridiculous. People were bidding $100,000 over asking pretty consistently. $50,000 over asking didn't mean you were going to get it, which is a pretty bizarre market. It has calmed down. I know it's hard to see on the graph there, but we're right at the end. It has seen a drop. So I have been seeing price reductions on properties. They're getting listed. they're on there for a week or two and they're going, oh, it's not selling, and they're dropping the price $15,000, $20,000. Some stuff is still going into multiple offers. So I'm finding that the stuff that's really desirable, that gets people emotionally attached to them, you know, they've got the beautiful granite countertops and the heated tile floors, and it's, you know, backing onto a school and all these great benefits. People are getting emotional about those and they're still bidding pretty high. But the fixer-uppers that don't have that curb appeal, that don't wow people, they're kind of sitting. People can pick and choose a little bit more. So we're seeing the bidding wars on those kind of cease to exist, which is nice because it means you can negotiate directly with the seller instead of competing against other buyers. And you can put subjects in your offer, subjects to financing, subjects to inspection, which is a sigh of relief, because it's been a ridiculous scenario of, subject-free offers that are extremely high risk, obviously. So it's nice that we're seeing a little bit more inventory coming on, actually a lot more inventory, but the demand is still high, but there's opportunities out there. Stuff is sitting. It's really hard to say how much of that is just springtime listings are increasing, how much of it is the interest rate that has increased, bringing down people's borrowing power, if uncertainty in the market is bringing it down. Likely it's a combination of all of those things. They've increased, they did a 1/4% increase earlier this year, and now they what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they increased interest rates by 0.5%. So that's a total of 0.75% since the beginning of the year. And fixed mortgage terms have gone up quite high because of that, because the banks are kind of speculating that it's going to continue climbing. So fixed rate mortgages are now climbing around the 4% range, which is a huge departure from a year ago where you could get sub 2% mortgages. So everyone's been waiting for opportunity to present itself, waiting for all these properties to come on the market, the bidding wars to go away, interest rates to go up, and all the property prices to come crashing down so that they can buy these great deals. Keep in mind that if you are now buying at a 4% interest rate instead of a 2% interest rate, that mortgage payment is going to be substantially higher. So yes, you're getting the property for less money if prices come down, but your mortgage payments could be higher. So it's not really any better of a scenario, it's just a different scenario. So just out of curiosity, these are kind of the 4 things that could happen. Interest rates and prices keep climbing. So we could see interest rates continuously going up for the remainder of the year, for the next 18 or even 24 months, and prices of housing continues to go up. It is possible, especially on the island, with the amount of demand that there is for housing, it still hasn't been fully met. So that could continue climbing for prices. We could see interest rates climb and prices drop. We haven't really seen prices drop yet, but obviously we've seen the interest rates creating a bit more of a stagnant market. So that's a possibility. We could see interest rates stop climbing and prices keep climbing. So one of the concerns about interest rates increasing is it slows the economy down. So if you jack up interest rates too much and they start a little bit of a recession, they're going to panic. So we are going to kind of see how the market adjusts to the increases in interest rates we've already seen. And if they start seeing the recession, the economy slowing down, they might just leave it. So they could leave interest rates, which could see property prices continue to climb, or interest rates could stop climbing and prices could drop. So these are variables. No one has a crystal ball. No one really knows for sure. And that's why I don't pay any attention to any of it. It's one of the biggest advantages for me investing in real estate is it's not about trying to figure out where the market's headed, where prices are going, what the economy is doing. This isn't a stock. You're not dependent on the property increasing in value to generate a return. If you are, you're speculating. And if you're solely banking on speculation, real estate, you're missing some of the biggest advantages of real estate. So things we don't know. If interest rates are going to continue to climb, if they are, how much are they going to climb? I have people saying that they're going to stop it now. If they increase it anymore, there's going to be a recession. The whole reason they started printing all the money they have for the last 2 years was to prevent a recession. If they jack interest rates to 3 or 4 or 5% right now, we could be in for that recession that they've been trying for 2 years to avoid. They could stop them. They're also seeing major inflation, and the best way to curb inflation is to increase interest rates. How much they're going to increase them is going to be kind of dependent on how the economy reacts to the increases we're seeing. If they climb, will it trigger a recession? Possibly. If so, how bad? We don't really know that. We could, if we saw interest rates like we did in the early 80s climb into the teens, we're going to see a complete meltdown of the real estate market and foreclosures everywhere. The bank doesn't want that. The economy doesn't want that. Most people are leveraged far heavier than they were in the 70s and 80s. If they were to jack interest rates to the rates we saw then, I would suspect that more than 50% of the people would start defaulting on their mortgages, and we'd be in a complete chaos. Nobody really wants that. I don't think it'll get that bad, but we could see a small recession like we saw in 2008. You could see a 5%, 10% drop in price, and then it just sits stagnant for a while. Recession and doesn't necessarily mean property prices drop. We can see a pretty catastrophic recession. Even in 2008, again, we saw a pretty bad recession as far as the economy went, but real estate prices didn't really drop. They stayed stagnant, but we don't know how much real estate itself is going to drop. How long it takes, if there is a recession, how long before it recovers. People have this doom and gloom concept of the crash in the 80s, the crash in the 90s, the 2008 crash, and they think of it as this catastrophic crash that lasted for years and years and years. If you look at them, most of them were a blip of somewhere between 12 and 18 months, and after 18 months, prices were back to where they were or higher. That's a pretty short window when you think that most people's term on their mortgage is 5 years. You could easily get a mortgage today, go through a recession, come back up before your term's even up. So it's usually not as severe as people think, and it usually doesn't last as long as people think. The other thing we don't know is if there's going to be more opportunity or better deals in the coming months. So again, we're seeing property prices remain where they are, possibly continuing to climb a little bit right now, but we are seeing more inventory. We're seeing stuff having slight price reductions. The actual prices of selling properties hasn't dropped yet, but we could be going in that direction. If prices drop and you can pick something up for a cheaper price, how much cheaper is that price going to be? And how far in the future are we going to be looking at those opportunities? No one has a crystal ball. This is why the interest rates and everything, as far as they are interesting. It's good to stay on top of this information, but being convinced that the sky is falling and avoiding investing in real estate is not the answer. The biggest advantage of investing in real estate is its stability, its ability to generate income despite what the economy is doing. So when the stock market crashes and you lose 15, 20, 25% of the money that's in the stock market, there's no monthly income that's still continuing to pay you like there is in real estate. So that's why it's not nearly as important to time the market perfectly in real estate in order to generate returns. You generate returns on cash flow, debt pay down. Things we can know. How much cash flow a property is going to generate. Obviously, we can figure out what the purchase price is going to be, what type of terms we're going to get on the mortgage. We're going to be able to figure out what your property tax, your insurance, what your basic costs of the property are going to be, which should be able to allow you to generate what type of cash flow you're going to see on the property. So that's something that we can figure out. How much debt pay down will occur in the next few years. So if you have a 5-year term, you can actually do a calculation to find out how much debt you actually pay off every single year. So that's very easy to calculate based on your mortgage terms. Now, based on the debt pay down and the cash flow, you can calculate your capitalization rate, you can calculate your return on investment. So if you're planning, if you have a set number in your head of what you want to see for a return on investment, or a set number you want to see for cash flow or cap rate, that's not usually that dependent on the value of the property. So if you can find that number that you like, it really doesn't matter where the market's headed. Obviously, you know how long you intend to hold the property. I always tell people, if you have a plan to sell a property within 1 to 2 years, that's risky in any market, whether it's on the way up, whether it's on the way down. You have to hope that in 1 to 2 years, the market's in a better scenario, not only that it hasn't dropped in price, but it's increased enough in price to cover the cost of buying and selling a property. There's real estate fees, there's lawyer fees, there's mortgage cancellation fees to get out of your mortgage. There's all sorts of costs associated with buying and selling a property. So if you have a very small window that you plan to hold the property, you want to make sure that you're generating in excess of that amount to cover those costs. And in a 1 to 2 year window, unless we see excessive appreciation, you might not get those costs back, right? So that's what we can know. So this is just a quick analysis. And again, this is based on stuff that we don't know. This is based on not knowing what the interest rates are going to be in a couple of years, not knowing what the value of real estate is going to be in a couple of years, but just a basic concept. If you were to buy a house today in 2022 at 800,000, and you think that likely that property in 2024 is going to actually only be worth $750,000, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to wait to 2024 so that I can get a $50,000 discount. Now, interest rates likely to continue to decline, maybe not, but you can see you're going to have a higher, larger mortgage, obviously, if you buy today than you are if you buy at a discounted price in 2024. So you're going to be at, say 3.5% today, you might be at 5% in 2024. Now that makes your mortgage payments drastically different, $2,800 a month versus $3,200 a month. So that small increase in the size of the mortgage from 640,000 to 600,000 isn't offset by the fact that there's 1.5% difference in interest rate. So you're actually going to be having smaller payments with the larger mortgage. Now, if you buy today versus 2 years, you're going to pay off mortgage between 2022 and 2024. With those mortgage terms, you're going to pay off about $25,000 of debt. So right off the bat, if you're going to get a $50,000 discount in 2 years, but you're going to pay off $25,000 of debt in that 2 years if you bought today, well, that closes that $50,000 gap down to $25,000. You're also going to see an increase in cash flow from the fact that your mortgage payments are smaller if you buy at the lower interest rate today. So that $4,000 cash flow is not only going to be for the next 2 years, but it will be continuing after that into 2024, 2025. So that reduces, again, that offset between the $800,000 purchase price and the $750,000 purchase price. Now, these are all variables that we can't calculate, but a lot of people think, I'm going to wait for a deal. I'm going to wait for a deal. Market's going to come crashing down and I'm going to buy it at a discount. And they wait and they wait and they wait, and years go by, and this ideal property that they've been waiting for never really shows up, or they finally commit to buying 6 or 7 years later. In the meantime, a mediocre deal today looks like an awesome deal in 5 years, just because you've paid off that much debt, you've generated cash flow, and ideally you see some level of appreciation. But even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean it wasn't a good idea to buy today instead of tomorrow. By 2027, my rough math based on assumptions, well, you'll be in about the same scenario if prices drop in the next 2 or 3 years. If prices continue to increase, obviously you're going to be way further ahead buying today than you would be waiting it out. The old adage, time in the market, not timing the market. That's what I really, really do love about real estate, and that I keep trying to explain to everybody. It doesn't matter what the market does. If you're not planning to sell in the next couple of years, buy it today. You're not going to regret buying it. People ask me, what out of my investment properties, which ones generated the highest return, which one provided the most income. the first one I bought, not because it's the best one, simply because it's the one that I've owned the longest. It's paid down the most debt. It's seen the most appreciation. And honestly, it cash flows the best because rents keep increasing, but the fixed price of what I paid for it stayed the same. So my expenses are relatively the same, and that cash flow gets stronger and stronger every year. Does anyone have any questions about that? Nothing. So,
sorry, quick question on the second one. Was it a 30-year amortization as well?
yeah, so that's a 30 based on a 30-year. So again, that's another variable. If you were to do a 25-year or a 20-year amortization, you would have actually paid down more debt, right? So there's so many variables, and that so many people get caught up on having to know everything about where the market's headed and every single detail about every single market they buy in, and they miss the fact that the sooner you're in, the sooner you're going to start generating returns and start paying down debt and seeing cash flow. That being said, buy for cash flow. If you're playing the speculation game and you're waiting for appreciation, or you're dependent on appreciation to generate returns, that's when you run into having to time the market correctly. If the market drops 5% or 10% over the next couple of years, it doesn't mean you've lost money. If you're paying down that mortgage and you're generating some level of cash flow, you might be revenue neutral. However, if you see the market continue to increase in value, you're going to regret it if you didn't buy in today. Just an example, the first house I bought, my primary residence, I bought in 2008 at the very beginning of the doom and gloom recession that everybody remembers is the worst thing ever. I sold that property for 8 years later for a 50% profit. So that is usually a good indicator that if you have to sell, if I had sold 2 years after buying, I would have sold at a loss. 8 years later, I generated an average of about 6.5% increased annual value on that property. So it doesn't really matter. Could I have got that property for a little bit of a discount if I bought in 2009, 2010? Maybe. But at the end of the day, I made money, and that's what this is all about. People ask me if I'm still buying in this market, and I'm not just preaching. I'm happy to announce that I, with a colleague of mine, bought 2 fourplexes in Port Alberni, closed on them April 15th. So yes, I'm still buying. These were MLS properties. I paid full asking price for them. Yeah, and I think they're going to perform fairly well. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is and continuing to buy. So does anyone have any questions about the market or predictions?
How much did you pay for them?
How much did I pay for them?
Yeah. They're both for, like, each one of those 2 buildings is a 4.6.
Yeah, so the square one in the bottom right there is a purpose-built fourplex. And then the little one looks like a house beside it is actually a house with a suite. And then they built an additional building behind it that is another unit with a suite underneath. Both of them are conforming fourplexes that are registered with the city, and the zoning is legitimate. The house with the suite and then the additional building, we paid $630,000 for. The actual fourplex was $590,000.
Are they occupied?
They are occupied, and they're way under market rent. So that is the issue right now.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
What do you plan on doing with them?
Yeah, and that's in this market, that's what we're seeing a lot of, is properties that are under rented. And as everyone knows, getting the existing tenants out or getting rents increased is a very difficult process. The tenants can stay there indefinitely, and we can increase rents only a very, very minuscule amount each year. Luckily, these properties are basically at a break-even scenario as we bought them. They might be hemorrhaging $500 a month. It's not the end of the world. All we need is essentially 1 to 2 tenants to turn over, and we will be cash flow positive. And after that, the uplift, if we were to get all 8 units turned over, it would be cash flowing significantly. So we're willing to accept that we're going to have to subsidize this property for a little bit until we get a couple of tenants turned over, but in the long term, they are going to generate pretty good cash flow. Yeah.
Sorry. So are you planning, is your plan right now with those 2 flip the tenants to get the ones that live there out for a fuel bill.
Yeah.
Get new tenants in.
So our plan is definitely to have tenants turn over. That being said, nobody's getting forced out. There is one unit that has some water damage and some possible mold. And that unit, we are going to need to get it vacant because that is a health concern and we need to get that addressed. That is a tenant that is already breaching the lease in multiple ways. So that person's going to need to have to go. The rest of them are all actually really good tenants and we're going to work with them. Luckily, right before we took possession, one of the tenants moved out, just gone. So it was vacant on possession. That was a huge bonus. The rest of them we're going to offer a scenario of helping with their moving expenses, offering a keys for cash if they want to go.
So you're aggressively trying to.
Yeah, and we don't want it to put somebody in an awkward scenario and push them out, but we will be encouraging people if they want to. We're also, the unit that's vacant right now, we're going to do a renovation in it. It's just a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit. So we're going to do new flooring, new paint, new countertops, do basic kind of lipstick renovation, and then show that unit to all of the other existing tenants and say, we can do the same to your unit if you're willing to accept a rent increase, right? So I stole that from TDI and Brandon, the tenant upgrade package, right? Where you just say, hey, you know, you're paying $700 a month. Market rent after renovation would be $1,200 a month, but we're happy to give it to you for, you know, $1,050 if you want us to upgrade your unit and you can stay, right? The other nice thing about the vacant unit is we might be able to move tenant out of one of their units into the other unit and then renovate that unit and kind of continue shuffling them around the building, right?
So so basically you're not waiting for people, you're encouraging it, you're offering.
Yeah, and again, we, with the vacant unit and even just the one other unit that we do need to get vacant to resolve the water issue, with those 2 tenants turned over, we will probably be in a cash flow positive stance. So time's still on our side. We're still seeing appreciation. We're still seeing debt pay down. We're not hemorrhaging money. So we're not going to force anybody that doesn't need to go. But if people are in a scenario where they've been thinking about going somewhere else and they need a little bit of help, they need some, you know, moving expenses covered and a couple months rent covered in their new place, we're definitely going to encourage that. That being said, I quite like most of the tenants. They're actually good people. So we're not going to be running at a loss if the other tenants stay, but we are going to make it easy for them to move if they want to move. That's essentially what it comes down to. Anyone have any other questions? Yeah.
You bought it at market value. Could you have negotiated lower because it was tenanted fully, or was that not even an option?
So these came on the market. And I was literally watching my computer screen when they came on, and I saw one come on and I said, oh, that's interesting. And then I saw the second one come on. I'm like, oh, that's more interesting. Within 3 hours, I had both of them under contract with due diligence to be able to get an inspection and financing and everything. I know at least one of them ended up with a backup offer, $100,000 over what we had it under contract for. So there wasn't much room to do negotiating a price. We got these simply because of how quickly we jumped on it. And even the listing agent said the only reason we got the seller agreed to just sell it immediately when they came on the market without waiting to see what other offers came in was the fact that we took both of them. They were happy that they weren't going to have to sell one and then try to sell the other one. And they also knew who we were going to use as a property manager. And the seller was confident that the tenants were going to be treated well. The tenants, for the most part, are all really good. And the owners were local to Port Alberni, and they just didn't want to see an out-of-town landlord that was just going to kick everybody out and treat the tenants poorly or just neglect them. So there was a little bit of a negotiation there as far as them liking us personally. The other?
Is that the private thing?
No, on that one, a lot of banks now are offering small business loans, which is kind of halfway between commercial lending and residential lending. So we actually needed to form a holding company, and we got lending through TD, through a small business loan. and they offered a 75% loan to value ratio, which was pretty good. I mean, 80% would have been better, but 75% is pretty reasonable. And I forget what the exact rate was. I think it's in the high 3%, 3.7% or something like that, which is reasonable. The nice thing about the mortgage, and at first I was kind of opposed to this, but now I'm actually pretty happy about it, is the mortgage is actually interest only. So there's no principal pay down. It's basically like a whole huge home equity line of credit. So we can choose to increase the payments and start paying down the principal, or we can just leave it as is. And because it's interest only, if we leave it as interest only, these properties will actually probably cash flow a little bit as they are. So we can just leave it as interest only. Once we get some units turned over and we start generating enough cash flow, then we could start focusing on paying down the mortgage, or we could just take that cash flow as cash flow and reinvest it into something else, use it to upgrade the units or invest in whatever we like. So at first, I always say that's the debt pay down is where you make a lot of your money in real estate. And so with no debt pay down, you're kind of losing out on that big advantage, but that debt pay down is just being paid as cash flow to you. It's up to you. You could use it as debt pay down, or you could just use it to do whatever you like with it, right? So yeah, the small business loans, lots of lenders are offering that product now. And it's a blended thing. It's kind of weird because it's not a business. It's the secured asset that they're lending on, but they do require you to either have a corporation or a holding company set up. So we had to quickly set up a holding company to put the property in. So yeah.
So that's because it's a four-plex. If it was a duplex, they probably wouldn't do it. Just because it's going.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. I think it does have to be multifamily to qualify for the small business loan. But that being said, fourplexes also fall under residential. It's 5 units and more that actually go into commercial. So I don't know if they consider the fact that it's combined 8 units, or if like 3plexes and 4plexes are considered commercial or residential. I'm not sure what exactly their lending criteria was on that, but we got it, so I'm not going to complain about it. Yeah, so I thought I'd talk briefly about how I can search for property. I've had a couple of clients kind of ask me like what does it look like on my end when I'm looking for properties and trying to help my clients find stuff? What criteria can I put in? What metrics can be used? Because there's certain things that are very easy to search for, and there's other things, primarily like latent value. So latent value is just the value of something that's essentially hidden. And if it's hidden, it's very hard to put that into a search criteria. So if you plan to use the unit as a short-term rental, and so it's going to generate higher cash flow, that's great. I can't actually search for strata properties that allow short-term rentals. I can read through the bylaws, and quite often they'll actually be posted right on the listing. It'll, if you read through it, it'll say somewhere no short-term rentals or short-term rentals are allowed. But I can't, it's not a box I can check. Latent values such as suite, carriage house, zoning, subdivision, potential, I can't search for. So if it has an empty basement that could have a suite put in, that's not a box I can check on my search criteria. If it has a corner lot and it's a big lot and there's room to put a carriage house in the back, that's not something I can search for. I can look at properties and tell you, yes, you could, or no, you couldn't, or you likely could, or likely couldn't, but it's not something I can set up in an actual search that can search for that stuff. Properties that have the potential to be rezoned, properties that have the potential to be subdivided, I can't search for potential. I can only search what the current zoning is, or what, development plans are in place. I can't actually narrow it down to things that have the potential to change. Narrowing search criteria too much, you can miss opportunities. So it's important to narrow your criteria to a certain degree, because you see, if you look at every property that comes on MLS every single day, you're just going to be overwhelmed, and it's too much to weed through. But every time you narrow your criteria a little bit, there's a chance that something that doesn't meet your criteria gets missed. And that's quite often due to the fact that a lot of properties are mislabeled, either due to, well, it's usually due to incompetence. Lots of agents just completely fail to advertise properties correctly. And maybe it has a basement suite, but they didn't put it in the listing. And that won't show up when I check the box for it having a suite. So there's, but you do need to obviously weigh the pros and cons of narrowing your search criteria so it's easy to find what you want, but not missing opportunities. So you got to take it with a grain of sand, and that's why I try not to narrow it too much. Yeah, well, Chris remembers we just looked at a property that was what 11,000 square feet, and it straight up wasn't. And I actually contacted the listing agent, argued me. I actually contacted the managing broker, and the managing broker said, yeah, you're right, and forced his agent to actually change the listing. It was a 5,500 square foot lot that was advertised as an 11,000 square foot lot that was ready for development. And when you're looking at developing a property, something that's twice the size has twice the potential. So it just mislabeled, right? So
And you made it even worse by including all the floor plans for a fourplex.
yeah, it was
Sorry, else.
yeah, he had like renderings of like what could be built, and it simply couldn't. There was no way that was going to happen. So
Failed to anticipate for the owners and subdivided the lot like a few years ago.
Yeah, so it was, there's a lot of that, and in that scenario, it was over advertised, but quite often it's under advertised. I helped the client buy a house in Lake Cowichan that was advertised as, I believe, 2,600 square feet. It was 3,600 square feet. They forgot to carry the one. It was a huge house with lake views, and was actually a huge upper unit, and then there was 2 units downstairs. So it was actually a threeplex, but people saw 2,600 square feet and said, oh, that's a little bit too small to have a threeplex, but it was completely mislabeled. They forgot to carry the one. Luckily, my client caught it, and I saw it, and they said, yeah, they forgot it. So we got a pretty good discount on that house because of incompetence. So again, if you were searching only for properties over 3,000 square feet, you would have missed it. So there's pros and cons to narrowing the search, but you got to narrow it to some degree. Otherwise, there's a lot out there. So I don't know, does anyone want to see what my software looks like from my end? Kind of get an idea of what it looks like? Yeah. Okay. It might be kind of small print here, but we'll set it up. Okay, let's see if I can share screen. All right, so hopefully everybody online can see what I'm doing here. So this is Matrix. This is the software that Vancouver Island Real Estate Board uses. This is kind of my home base. So I can search from residential property, commercial property, or both. So we'll go cross property. So that'll search for residential and commercial. So I can search obviously for your property type, like single family detached, half duplexes, condos, businesses, row houses, townhouses, industrial, full duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, things like that. So you can see right now there's on Vancouver Island, there's 3,200 listings. That's too many. So let's say we just want single family detached, full duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. So that narrows the number of properties down to about 1,500. And actually, you know what, I wouldn't I wouldn't actually search for both commercial and residential simply because it actually narrows the search criteria. So let's just go residential. So single family detached, triplex, quadplex, and full duplexes, all of those do fall under residential. Fiveplexes and up falls under commercial property. Now, there is the option, a little button right here that enables me to search for suites. So this searches for additional accommodation fields. So when we're listing a property, there's a little box we can check as a listing agent that has additional accommodations. So if the agent has checked that box, it will find it, either existing. This will also search if there's 2 or more kitchens. And that's how I actually used to search before this button existed, because many agents would you have to put the room dimensions and everything into the listing. And so they would actually list that there's 2 kitchens, but they'd forget to check the additional accommodation box. So this checks the additional accommodation box, 2 kitchens, or if the agent has put in the remarks, in-law, teen, granny, carriage, garden suite, anything like that, it will pop up in there. So by checking that box, it should narrow the search significantly. So now we're looking at either single family homes with suites or full duplexes, 3plexes, or quadplexes. Now I can also edit the search by map, by geographical map. So if there's certain areas you want to avoid, or certain areas you want to invest, obviously, this is where you would do that. So I can make it relatively broad. Let's just say we only want to look in the Nanaimo area. So we're going to pick this area here. That'll get rid of everything else. That's going to narrow our search. Now we can also exclude areas. So nobody wants to invest in the downtown core. So let's say we don't want this area here. I'm not saying don't invest there. I'm just saying this is hypothetical. We can exclude the shape. So basically it's going to say we're not looking in that area. So that narrows the search. No, sorry. To about 125. So that's still too many. So what's the most we want to pay for a house with a suite or a duplex, 3plex, 4plex? What's the high end? 800,000. Great. So that narrows it down to 34 matches. So there's now what I could do at this point, and if you want to choose the number of bedrooms, you want all of them to be 2-bedroom units minimum, then we need to say, okay, well, if it's a 4plex, we need at least 8 bedrooms. Square footage, you can choose the year built. So if you say, I don't want anything older than 2005, everything, before that was junk, I don't want anything from there. We can narrow that. However, a lot of agents forget to put the year or put the wrong year. So I don't like narrowing that down. So that narrows it down. Now, what I can typically do is from the results, I can set up an automated search. So these are the results. So I can look at them either in this order, or I can look at them as a map, and I can search through them one by one, look at the listings. It's going to give me the info. Here you go. Here's suite. You can see 2 kitchens. Price decrease from $799 to $749. So there you go. It's happening. No, 2 kitchens, 1 on each level. So there's the lower level and then there's the main level. So it's a BC box house, 1 on each level. So now from the results, I can actually set up an automated email. And I can set this search up for any clients. And what it will do is it will automatically send through all of these properties immediately. And then every day it will send through any new properties that match that criteria. So you set $800,000, it's got to be something with a suite or a duplex, 4plex, 3plex. every day you will get an email of everything new on the market. So at first you're going to get hit with pages of all of the results, but then after that, you're only going to get 3, 4, 5 listings a day coming through that are the new ones that are coming on the market. I can also set it up. If I check this little box right here, pending, and set it up, that's going to show you what is currently available on the market. And it's also going to show you everything that has had subjects removed. So it's essentially sold. And the nice thing about that is if I have it set up that way on your auto email to you, you will watch the properties coming on the market. And then as they sell, you will see what they're selling for. And you can see if they're consistently going over the asking price. If you thought, hey, that one looked like a really, really good deal, and it turns out it sold $100,000 over asking price, well, then you'd be like, okay, clearly the asking price didn't match the sale price, right? So that's kind of some of the search criteria I have. This is fairly limited as far as that goes. Does anyone have any other questions just regarding this end of it? The commercial one's a little bit different. So this would be multifamily, right? So typically I don't do a lot of, you can search businesses that are for sale, industrial land, mixed use. Most of the time it's multifamily. So that will be 5 units or more. And then quite often what I'll do is the square foot total. What it will actually pop up here is when I click results, it'll come up with a bunch of stuff, multifamily, and over on the included, it says land or building and land. So these are multifamily sites that can be built on, or they're existing multifamily buildings. So if I want to narrow that down, I can just go square foot total, 5 or more. So that's going to narrow it down. Now I go back to results. Now I'm still seeing, yeah, so now I'm seeing building and land or a building. So it's not showing raw land anymore. These are completed buildings. Obviously I can search sales history going back, I think, to maybe even to the 80s if you're curious when a building sold, what it sold for. Looking at previous listings can kind of, sometimes the old information was more relevant than the new listing. So yeah, I don't know, hopefully that's a little bit of an understanding, and then I can show you another program we use called AutoProp, which has some more advantages than what you see here. Before I move on, does anyone kind of have any questions? Yeah.
Can anybody have those searches or just agents?
Just agents. So this is, you have to be a real estate agent or like an appraiser. You have to be related to the industry to get a Matrix account. It's offered through our real estate board. There's limitations on how much information I can provide the general public. Like I can't, for example, take a whole bunch of sales history from Vancouver Island for the last 20 years and compile all of it and send it offshores to somebody that wants to research our market and stuff like that. So yeah, you are restricted to who can access it just because there's limitations on what we can actually do with it. So unfortunately, I would love to be able to provide software to people so that they can just do their own searches, because it's sometimes you just want to play around with it yourself. And unfortunately, that's not the reality of it. It's yeah, a real estate agent only software.
It's not like Netflix, so you can share your password.
I probably could. I just don't know how many people I want to give my password out to. Yeah, and learning the software, just handing out my password. If you're familiar with the software, it'd probably be okay. But that's the other issue, is I have mine set up with all of my contacts are in here, all of their emails, their search criteria. So giving someone else my password to get in there would be a huge, yeah, privacy consent issue. So yeah, and just as far as properties that what I see on my end is a little bit different. So this is a fourplex that's for sale. So we have a program called TouchBase, and it is a way that the real estate agents communicate with each other. So these are the listing agents. I can put in a showing request. I can ask for information on the property. things like that. I just punch in the data I want to show it, send a request, it comes back. It's quite often listing agents will put information about the property here that they don't necessarily want the general public to know. Then there's also supplements. And this is usually going to contain things like the title for the property disclosure statement. They've put tenant showing times on here. So this is a great way. If I was interested in viewing this property, I can check that out, see when the tenants are allowing viewings and go through that way. Quite often, if it's a commercial property, they'll put rent rolls in there of what the income and expenses are, what the current tenancy rates are, things like that, that aren't necessarily in the listing. The listing is the basic write-up of the property. I always like to go down to, so you can see they've put in the units here. Actually, this would be publicly viewable. They've put the rents in for the units. That's 2-bedroom units for 850 and 700, very low. Yeah, and then licensee notes, they usually put information about showing property, financial information about the property. So that's kind of the difference of the stuff that I see. Quite often with properties now, when there's an accepted offer, but they haven't removed subjects, it still shows up as active. But if I click on touch base, it'll pop up and it'll say accepted offer, subject removal date, May 1st. And now I'll know, okay, well, it's under contract and it's possible that it's going to come back on the market May 1st, or it's going to complete at that time. So that's just a quick and easy way for me to find out if it's actually still readily available. So the other program I use, just before I move on, any other questions about Matrix? Nothing, pretty straightforward. So there's another program. I'm not totally familiar with this yet. I'm just going to make sure that this is following along to AutoProp here. So this is a program called AutoProp. This is relatively new to us, and it's a huge benefit in well-developed cities like Vancouver and Victoria. It has a little bit less resources as far as places like Nanaimo. And when you get into places like Gold River and stuff like that, it's basically useless. But what you can search for is, it's obviously, as you can see, a satellite image of a property, and you can add layers. And this is much like your GIS maps for, yeah.
Still just available to you.
It is. Unfortunately, this is only available, as far as I know. I tried seeing what the criteria was to get onto it, and it asked for my sign-in information as a real estate agent. So I'm assuming it's only available to me, but I'll look into it, because if anybody else could get access to this, it's lots of fun to play around on. So it covers things like municipal boundaries. So if I turn that on, it takes a little bit of time. It's pretty in depth. So you can see the red area is Nanaimo. That red border, anything outside of that is going to be the regional district of Nanaimo, not Nanaimo. So it covers things like that. Now, this is where you could spend a lot of time playing around with it. And again, I wish everybody could have access to this, because there's potential here to find latent value in property. So if you put this tab on zoning, it's going to put an overlay of actually what the zoning is for every single piece of property, which is a pretty neat feature to just see a satellite image of what zoning is. And it's always interesting when you see little properties that aren't zoned, what everything around them is. And if you click on it, it'll bring you up to the zoning code. So this particular one is Old City Medium Density Residential. Now right beside it's R14, which is zoned for low density. So this one has ended up with medium density for whatever reason that doesn't match the surrounding zoning. Even easier, you click on R15, it will take you directly to the city's zoning department and tell you what the zoning is. So that one is R15. So it'll tell you the zoning provides for residential rehabilitation and the development of new medium density multifamily residential developments that are consistent with the historical architectural style of the area. So that's obviously very specific. They probably brought that zoning in for a few different properties that were a little bit different than what was going on in the area. how do I get back out? Not that. So that, yeah, can tell you what the existing zoning is, which is nice. Now, again, places like Gold River, they haven't updated all of this information to the software people that create these programs. So stuff like this isn't really available. What is available in Nanaimo is the official community plan. So this is super cool. You just turn that on, and it might take a little bit of time here. There we go. This tells you what they plan to put in any of these areas. So you can see, like in this area, this is neighborhood. And if you click on it, it will take you to the community plan and explain to you what neighborhood is. And then the darker yellow is going to be urban corridor. So again, that's quite often like mixed commercial residential or just medium density residential, things like that, commercial center. So this is what they have planned in the future for these areas. Maybe the zoning already matches what it is, but maybe not. So you could play around with looking at what the existing zoning is and what the official community plan has slated for that property and see if there's a discrepancy there. Hey, this is single family R1 zoning, but they have it slated for, you know, R12 multifamily or whatever it is. So you could say there's latent value in buying that property because it has the potential to be subdivided or rezoned or whatever it is. So again, this is not necessarily a way to search properties, but search information about areas. So that one's pretty handy. The official community plan and the neighborhood plan and the local area map. So you can see when I hover on the thing here, there's no data available for this area. So every municipality calls it something different. For Nanaimo, it's the official community plan. That's what's on here. They don't have the floodplain data on here. So that's one thing I can search. I can search for comps that have sold in the area. It will ask me more about, you know, dates and when they sold and the type of property and stuff like that. Another interesting one is broker listings. So this isn't so common with residential, but quite often when it comes to commercial property, they won't necessarily be listed on MLS, but they will be, I can find them on here. So I want to look at investment properties, search, and then this is going to come up with stuff that you aren't necessarily going to find on MLS, but you can find on here. Oh, there you go. There we found one. Buy this one, multifamily on Victoria Street. So again, I don't believe this is on MLS right now. It's something that's only on here, which I'm not totally sure why commercial agents list not on MLS. But so anyhow, that's kind of the other one. This one's great for finding out neighborhoods, zonings, latent defect of things that could be. And you can actually also search by property address. I think it was 2013. What was the name, that listing of that fourplex I just left out?
Spencer?
Was it Spencer? I think you're right. Good remember. Was it, or was it 2021-3? There we go. So it'll bring it up. There it is. So it will, if you click on this, it'll generate a little bit of a report, tell you the property identification number. So this is kind of interesting. It's zoned R5. So 3 and 4 unit residential. So this is actually a legitimate fourplex. This isn't a duplex that's been converted. This is actually a purpose-built fourplex that is legitimate. Yeah, it gives you a little satellite image of the property, Google Street View, just the dimensions of the property. So again, this is handy if you're looking at a house that requires a carriage house or something. You can see, okay, how far is it from the property lines? How big is the footprint of the carriage house going to be? And see if it's something that's going to fit on the property. It even gives you actually elevation, which.
I have a question.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
How come the new buildings, the city is allowing them to be like, I was facing steps between a fence and a new building. Yesterday, it was like 4 feet.
Yeah, so.
How is the city allowing that?
So it depends on the zoning. So certain like residential, like R1 zoning has certain setbacks from fences. If it's like townhouse zoning, they allow much smaller setbacks. They're trying to increase density, and that comes from stuffing more stuff in, right? And that's what developers want. If they're going to buy a quarter-acre lot or a half-acre lot, they want to cram as many units on there as they can. The city wants as many units as they can because there's a housing crisis. So they're saying, you know what, you can build as close to the fence as you want. If you get into commercial buildings, they're built to the lot line. They're touching. The building next door is touching, and there'll be 2 cinder block walls that go up, and there's no separation between the buildings, right? So
How come they don't allow it on a big lot that doesn't have an alley entrance?
yeah, so again, it kind of depends on the existing zoning of the property. If they will allow it, you can ask for a variance if there's something in particular you want, and you want to build a carriage house or a greenhouse, and there's not enough room, and you say, hey, I really want to build this. I'm going to create more housing, but I need you to give me a variance to be able to build this. And then they're probably going to, consult with your neighbors and make sure that they're okay with you building, that they are going to do an addendum or an amendment to the zoning and everything, so that your neighbors aren't going to be offended by the fact that you've now breached essentially the bylaws, right? So, yeah, there are ways around it, but the zoning sets the setbacks, and a lot of the zoning is old setbacks, and they are what they are. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, the elevation is interesting because I've looked at some properties, and without even having to go look at the property, I find out that it's on the side of a cliff. The satellite image doesn't show you any of that. And then it's going to go into your property tax information and stuff like that, which isn't too exciting, but is a little bit interesting. So that's kind of all I've got for how I show properties or how I can view properties. Does anyone have any questions about criteria or how to search for stuff? Yeah.
Talking about variances, right?
Yep.
Really just being a flat variance. What are the chances of getting a variance to have on one property, three lots, instead of renting just to 2 people? Like I have a property that has big carriage house, and it's a huge house.
Yeah.
That can easily upstairs and downstairs and create more housing.
Yeah.
Right? Is that a possibility to get a variance for as well?
It is, but it's probably not super likely, because what's going to happen is they're going to want to consult with your neighbors. And why would your neighbors say yes? That just means more people living next door to them, right? So you're asking to bend the rules. There has to be a benefit for other people to want to say yes to that, right?
So my neighbors.
They likely will. If you're going for a variance, I'm honestly not totally sure what the variance restrictions are, or if it's a case-by-case scenario. But if you're trying to go through a rezoning, the rezoning application requires you to consult with the public, and you need to have the open forum where people come and say, no, there's an endangered frog living in this tree and it can't be redeveloped and everything. So it's going to go to the public to kind of make that decision.
I spoke with somebody in the city hall, and I said, could we have a basement suite and a carriage house?
Yep.
They said you can't have both.
Yeah.
You can only have one.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by the variance. So like-
Yeah. So yeah, as it is now, you can't. So my understanding of it is it's a pretty rare scenario they grant a variance. There has to be like a reason, not just I want to make more money. It has to be, hey, I have to
create more housing.
Yeah, but it's one more. It's not like quite often, like when you're looking at building a multifamily, if you're like, hey, we're trying to build more housing, give us a variance to go up another story and we can build 8 more units or 6 more units.
Right.
Then they might say, yeah, it's going to be a tower anyhow, one more
Is there
story.
anyone you could recommend specifically that we talk to, see?
Sadie.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. She's super knowledgeable when it comes to what the likelihood of variances are. I looked at a variance, actually in Port Alberni for a property that was a 6-plex that was on a lot that was technically too small to be multifamily, even though it was already existing. And it's because they changed the zoning rules at some point in time after the 6-plex was built to make the minimum lot size 11,000 square feet. The existing lot size was 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. The issue being they weren't concerned about the building. The issue was if the building burnt down, they wouldn't let you rebuild because it doesn't now match the zoning. So the issue was the insurance company couldn't say, yes, if it burns, we can rebuild it, because they can't. And so the lenders said, well, if we're going to lend you $800,000 on the 6-plex and it burns to the ground, you can't rebuild the 6-plex. It's only worth $400,000 as a lot. You're just going to walk away from the mortgage. Luckily, we got something from the city saying, yeah, it's fine. We acknowledge it's there. And the lenders went ahead with it. But I'm running into that more and more where if it doesn't match the zoning, it's a no-go. And I did contact the city and ask about variances, just saying, like, can you create a variance that just says this is already in the existing 6-plex on a lot that's technically too small? Can we just create a variance for that particular lot saying that, yes, you can have a 6-plex on there? And they said, not really. So it's an uphill battle. I don't know the exact procedure of going through it, but it's tough. Yeah.
So on that same thing, then, what if you had, not that I would do this, but what if someone who just says, F it, and just says, I'm gonna do it anyways?
Unless the neighbors complain.
Yeah.
Like, what are the consequences? What do they do? Like,
If your place is actually safe and if it has a decent access, even if they come to inspect it, they probably just give you, no, I don't think there are any kind of legal consequences. They
like,
just-
do you actually have to kick people out at that point? Do they fine you? Like, what is-
So what I've typically seen, and I don't know if this is the steadfast rule, is they will put a bylaw contravention on the title of the property saying that this is not supposed to be here. I don't know if they can evict people, because you can't evict people for anything. So they might say this can't exist. And if it becomes a nuisance property, it's an ongoing issue, and they're partying all the time, and the neighbors are calling the bylaws every other day, and it's a pain in the bylaw officer's side, and they're just like, oh man, we've got to do something. They're going to say, you got to get them out. You've got 2 months. You got to shut it down. Before I moved to the island, I looked at a property that was actually zoned ALR. It had a house on it. Beside that was a mobile home. Beside that was another house. Beside that was a workshop with a suite above it. This was on 6 acres, so it's not like it was crammed together, but it was zoned ALR. So none of it was conforming. So this was before I was a real estate agent, and luckily I was working with a good real estate agent, and she looked into what was on file at the city. A lot of agents don't do that. She did. There was already 2 bylaw contraventions on title saying these units, you're allowed 1 house and 1 mobile home. The other units need to be removed. They actually have to be removed from the property, not just because they were separate properties. Removing the stove wasn't enough. It's because these were self-contained houses. They needed to be removed from the property. I drove past that property recently. Guess what? It's all still there and it's all still occupied. They just made amends with the neighbors, said, hey, we're really sorry. We're going to stay on top of it. And the bylaws has better stuff to do. It's complaint-based, and realistically, they don't care.
I've heard about somebody that the city mania take the whole street apart.
They could. It is probably in their ability to do so. Typically, what I see is to make it a residential unit, there needs to be a kitchen, and in that kitchen, there's the stove. And they'll cut the power to the stove And then that's it, because they can't tell you to like rip out the bedrooms and the drywall and the flooring. That has nothing to do with the suite. That could just be included in the square footage of the house. So you could remove the kitchen, just add that square footage back to the house. So they can't tell you to rip it apart necessarily. Where they would run into an issue is if a whole bunch of work was done, like a whole bunch of plumbing was done in the lower unit, and a whole bunch of electrical work was done in the unit, and then it was all drywalled over, and all of that work was done without permit. They might say, we need to inspect all of the electrical and all of the plumbing. You need to pull all this apart so that we can actually inspect that it's up to code and it's okay.
Maybe that's what it was.
So it could be more that it was done without permit, more so that they were asking to remove the suite. But I have very few instances where I've actually talked to people where they've actually taken suites out, and quite often it's partiers. Bylaws comes in, says shut it down, they cut the power off to the stove, they kick the people out, they reconnect the stove, get better tenants in there, and never hear from it again. That it's, maybe they're going to start getting stickier and stickier on that stuff, but just stay on top of your tenants and make sure that they're not pissing off the neighbors. They don't want to shut down suites because there's a huge housing crisis, and going around shutting suites down is not going to help them out. And they're going to have, if there's a tenant in there, they're going to have a very angry tenant likely going to the media saying, hey, the municipality is going around shutting down suites and kicking people onto the street, right? And that's not going to look right in their face. So yeah, but it is illegal, but I do it anyhow, but you didn't hear that here.
It's recorded.
Oh, it's recorded up. Yeah, so yeah, any other questions regarding any of that fun stuff?
So Jason, have you heard anything more about deadlines and short-term rental restrictions?
I kind of wish I guess you kind of missed the beginning of the thing here. I was supposed to have somebody here to talk about short-term rentals, and she ended up with COVID. So I'm hoping next month.
Try again next month?
Try again next month. I'm hoping she'll be able to come out. If she can't make it out, I'll try to put something together myself. That being said, I'm not an expert on short-term rentals, but I can do my homework and figure it out. But yeah, the short-term rental thing, they're saying they're going to be pushing for a business license. Which isn't the end of the world, but I've also heard that they're pushing for you having to live in the property to be able to do it. So I don't know if that.
File a form with them, you gotta provide a parking stall, and a bunch of stuff they put in.
Yeah.
But what caught me was, as they said, that they're gonna start accepting business license applications at the beginning of April.
Accepting what?
Business license applications.
For
April, for
Yeah.
Airbnbs, but they didn't specify how many licenses they were going to issue from what I could see, nor what the deadline was.
Yeah.
To actually file.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll have somebody that can speak more of that, but it's also, that isn't a Nanaimo thing. It is by municipality. Victoria has their own rules, Port Alberni has their own rules. Every municipality is different, so it's hard to stay on top of stuff. And I'd always be a little bit skeptical buying something with the sole intent of only renting it as an Airbnb, because rules change. Like Nanaimo is changing now, and we're going to see some municipalities that are encouraging tourism to just let it go, and then we're going to see other places that have major housing shortages and too many tourists that they don't really want them. They're going to say, no, we got to do away with these. We want these to be long-term rentals. I think a contributing factor there will also be whether or not the unit can be a full-time residence. Like renting out a bedroom was kind of the original plan of the Airbnb. You're not renting out something that's a self-sustaining habitable unit on its own. You're renting out a portion of your house, right? So they might turn more of a blind eye to it if you're not taking out of the housing pool. But again, it's changing pretty rapidly. But yeah, I'll hopefully next month have a full update on what Nanaimo is doing and what other municipalities are doing. I'm always just scared that they're going to change rules all of a sudden, and you could be in a situation. Yeah. So anyhow, just back to the search criteria. The more specific you are on what you're looking for, I get a lot of clients that say, "Hey, I'm looking for an investment property." Well, that's pretty vague, and I can't search for that. There's no box that just says investment property and it brings up something, right? I can't search by cap rates. I can't search by potential of subdivision. Whereas if you say, hey, I'm looking for properties that are zoned such and such, that only have a single residence on them right now. I know in Duncan, there's properties that are already zoned to multifamily that just have single family homes on them. So that's something where I could probably with AutoProp look at the existing zoning and see if these are just single family homes that are kind of going against what the current zoning is of multifamily and see that there's latent value there. So the more specific you are, but it's very time consuming to do these searches. So the more specific you are, the easier it is and the faster I can find it. Any questions? Yeah.
Can you search type of construction, like what it's built out of?
To a certain degree, I can, yes. There are some things, I don't know if I can in commercial, but I believe I can in residential. I'd have to check. I honestly haven't searched by construction. You're just thinking like something concrete versus something wood.
Like I'm a bricklayer, so the house I can flip, it's a different one than the average carpenter.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking for.
Right. Yeah, I believe I can pick out construction material as far as siding and stuff like that goes. So I'll check on it really quick when the meeting's done here and see if I can find it. Yeah, anything else?
With AutoProp, are you limited to the geographical? Strictly Vancouver?
No, that's another thing about AutoProp. I can check Vancouver out. I don't know. I haven't seen the extent of how far it goes. I don't know if it's interprovincial, but I know I can check out the Lower Mainland. But once you start getting up into like Prince George and places like that, it starts just being a factor of the municipalities there haven't uploaded it to have the database to do it, because it's obviously very labor intensive to upload geographically the official community plan and all the zoning and everything. It's a lot of work, right? So bigger cities have it, smaller cities not so much, right? But Vancouver, I'm amazed how much information you can pull up on a property there. It's quite the program for there. They can tell you everything about the neighborhood, where the water lines run and the power lines run. And I can also pull up development permits, active development permits in Nanaimo, as well as other places on the island, just to see what, quite often it's someone's putting a deck on their house or something. So I haven't searched yet if I can choose what type of permit it is. It's usually someone building a carport, so it's weeding through a lot of stuff that's irrelevant to try to find something that is relevant, right? Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, last thing, nobody can forget. I've been working on this forever. I created a website by investors for investors. That's a pretty clever logo. I stole all this from a friend, by the way. So it's like Wi-Fi, but Wi-Fi, and then instead of the little archy things of the Wi-Fi, it's roofs of houses, right? Pretty clever. Anyhow, so I've had a company working on this site for quite a while. My intent is it is up and running. I do have some resources on there. I have the recorded videos that I've been making from the meetup. A lot of them are on there. I have some other educational videos. I try to post news just about interest rates, about market things they're doing. I want to have more on there. I want to have resources on there as far as forms and contracts and terms and clauses and stuff to put in contracts. Resources like, putting together a tenant upgrade package form, things like that, just valuable resources. News links. I want to have links to other resources such as good mortgage brokers, good home inspectors, good contractors, just other connections of people that could benefit you. Videos. I'm going to have, there is a calendar on there that has all of the scheduled meetups, these meetups on there. And I'll probably start putting other things on there like Randy and Steve from the Reinvestors have meetup groups down in Victoria. I'll probably put those on the calendar. Just things, if I have anything of interest going on that other people want to attend, I'll put them on the calendar. And eventually, I haven't figured out how I'm going to do this yet, but I'd like to put like opportunities on there of either opportunities for investing with people or just deals that I see on the market, something that looks like it might cash flow. the fourplex on Spencer looks really good, and I can put a little analysis on there. This is how it looks. This is the cash flow, just so people can kind of go on there. That might be a little bit before I get to that point, but there will be a link also to the Facebook version of it, which will have more and more updates. Again, I'll be posting on there just about this meetup, links to the videos. And I ask anybody that has connections, anyone that has resources to people that are beneficial to know. Rock stars know rock stars. I know some very, very good contractors. I know some terrible contractors. I'm not going to put the terrible contractors' names on there, even though I'd like to.
I can tell you a terrible contractor does.
Don't use that. You didn't hear it here. I love hearing people to not use and people to avoid, but unfortunately, when you like post it on Facebook or on a website and those people find out, that's slander or deprivation of character, and that's a lawsuit. So I won't put negative things on there, but knowing who the good people are to go to is key. The people around you are the ones that are going to get the deals done. The lenders that can find you the mortgage on the weird properties that are going to make it happen. The insurance brokers, the contractors, property managers, things like that can take a good deal and make it bad, or take a bad deal and make it good. So I would love to have contacts of people on there just so that people have that reference. It's up and running now. It's a little bit bare bones. I'm going to be adding to it as much as I can just to make sure it's a valuable resource for everybody to go to. So yeah, maybe I'll get some cool stickers made up or something too. Yeah, I think that was all I've got. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about anything to talk about?
Question, yeah. So looking at properties and when you go there, you're trying to figure out if you can have a potential in-law suite or a basement suite. Since we don't really know what the code is, how do we just kind of, by looking at it, we know that can this potentially be done without a lot of money just going waste, or kind of you have to cut a lot of things into, let's say ceiling is not too high for a basement suite, and then you don't really know that.
So I mean, the quickest, easiest due diligence to find out if a house can have a suite is the zoning. Most zoning in Nanaimo does allow for suites. But then there's some restrictions about the amount of square footage that the suite can contain. I think there's a maximum square footage, and also it can only be a percentage of the house. Like I think this suite can only be 40% of the overall. So the main unit has to be 60%. The suite can be up to 40%. But as far as things like ceiling heights and stuff like that, that would require you to go and actually physically view the property, right? And have an idea of what the building code is for minimum ceiling height. And sometimes it's really hard to tell by pictures. Sometimes the agent will be nice enough to say ceiling height in basement 6.5 feet. And then you just know that it ain't gonna happen. Otherwise going there and actually checking it out and looking for things that, would be red flags that could prevent it from happening, or things that would make it really easy. I have a fairly extensive background in doing renovations and adding suites and stuff like that to houses. So I'm pretty good at figuring out how to run the plumbing, if the electrical system is going to be up to snuff, if you add a suite, just exterior entrances and fire codes and just window egress for bedrooms, things like that. I'm usually fairly savvy at being able to identify why a house could or couldn't have a suite. But yeah, without going and physically seeing it, some of those limitations, as soon as you walk in, are so evident that there's no way a suite's going in here. And other times you realize that there was once upon a time a suite in here, and there'll be nothing to put back in. Right? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. And every municipality is different. The Nanaimo zoning, if there is an existing suite and it was put in pre-2005. It is basically grandfathered in, providing it's safe. If it was put in after 2005 and it was done without a permit, that's when you run into the issue where there's going to be a bylaw if bylaws is caught it, there's going to be something on the title saying that the suite was done without permit. And if they catch wind of it, they'll usually come and inspect it and say, hey, it looks safe, but we're going to put this on the title of the property saying it was never inspected, it was done, you know, without permits or anything like that, right? So every municipality is different, but 2005 is the cutoff for Nanaimo. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Another question on Airbnb, say for example, you have an Airbnb you've been running for a couple of years. So you know what your cash flow is, you have it on your tax forms and so on, right?
Yep.
Is there a way in your software to include that cash flow on the appraisal? Say for example, the property appraises at $500,000, but you know that with the cash flow, once you discount it, it's supposed to be at 600,000.
Yep.
Can you sell it at 600,000 if it's not appraised at 600,000?
Not really when it's just a residential house, because anybody, well, depending on the bylaws, anybody could turn any house into an Airbnb and essentially generate more income and instantly increase the value, but that's up to each individual buyer. If it's a commercial property, then yeah, absolutely, commercial properties are strictly appraised on their ability to generate income, right? Their cap rates or the net operating income is the value of the property. So if you were to kick all the tenants out, run all of them as short-term rentals, 2 years later, you've got, you know, this huge increase in income, and then that property would likely appraise much, much higher because of that. But because it's residential, they really only look at the comparable houses next door. They don't really factor in the income into consideration.
The reason why I'm asking is because thinking about the small business loan we were talking about, wouldn't it be considered a business and easier to sell that way?
As far as the appraisal value, like selling it, it really depends on what the buyer's intent is for the property. If they just want to move into it, it doesn't matter that you've been running it as an Airbnb. But as far as like refinancing goes, and most banks, especially if you are going to go with a small business loan and you have 2 years of running it as an Airbnb and can prove income and expenses, most of them will take the income from that in consideration to the ability to service the mortgage, but they won't necessarily increase the loan amount because of it, because it's still, if you say, hey, you know, this property, because it's run as a short term, generates this much income based on such and such cap rate, is now worth $800,000. But the houses on both sides just sold for $600,000. The bank's not going to lend you more than the $600,000 value, because the person buying it isn't necessarily going to give you $800,000 when they could buy the one next door for $600,000 and just do what you're doing, right? So it doesn't really push up value on residential. Where it does start getting a little bit more gray is when you start getting into duplexes, fourplexes, things like that, that are still residential, but are income specific properties and are kind of sold based on their income potential and comparables. It's kind of a mixed area. But yeah, straight up house is going to be a tough one to get a high appraisal just because of the way you're running the property, right?